Welcome to the Neijiaquan podcast. My name is Isaac Kamens. This is a bi-weekly podcast where my friend Jess O'Brien and I discuss internal martial arts, Qigong, and meditation. This is our 2-year anniversary episode, so we're going to celebrate it by talking about one of the seminal figures in internal martial arts, Sun Lu Tang. So in this episode, we begin by talking about Sun's early life a little bit, his training with his main teachers. Then we look at some of his writings about training internal martial arts in general and the principles and how they relate to Taoism and meditation. So again, I want to thank everyone for your support over the last couple years. It really means a lot to us that people are listening. We got some exciting stuff coming up. We got interviews. We got more training sessions. Obviously more podcasts, so stick around. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks for listening and take care of yourselves.
Welcome to the Neijiaquan podcast with Isaac and Jess. Today we want to talk about one of our favorite martial arts figures, the famous Sun Lu Tang, who's well known in the internal martial arts community as a master of Xingyi, Bagua, and Tai Chi. And so over the years, we've heard a lot of stories about him and his adventures. And he's sort of I'd say a pretty important figure in internal martial arts history. Someone who, especially well known for bringing the literary side of it, like the books and the philosophy and the teachings and sort of the cosmological concepts. Things like Tai Chi and Bagua have all this philosophical background. So Sun Lu Tang helped bring that to the surface and help make Chinese internal boxing more sort of like legit, made it more mainstream somehow.
Yeah, he's the sort of the godfather of Neijiaquan, right? I mean, he was the one that sort of coined the idea of Tai Chi, Xingyi, and Bagua being one family of martial arts, aka internal martial arts versus, external martial arts. He was a pioneer in sort of defining the three of them as one family.
Right. And another thing that's interesting is I think he's a little bit of an older generation than some of the other guys. Like he was around to meet some of these original masters like Cheng Tinghua and Bagua or Guo Yunshen and Xingyi. So he's this connection to the past, and he wrote a lot about it to sort of preserve those teachings and memories. Other schools may sort of have them as oral tradition, but he laid them all out for everyone to use.
Yeah.
So I'd like to start by looking at Robert W. Smith's Xingyi book from 1972. And he gives a little biography of Sun Lu Tang. So it's like 2 paragraphs here. Sun Lu Tang was a giant in the internal martial arts. Born poor in 1859, his father died when he was 9. So he has a life of hardship and goes through some really hard times. And then eventually, it's age 15, he begins to study Xingyi from Li Kuai Yuan. And we haven't talked about Li Kuai Yuan, but he's somebody who's... his teachings are preserved by Sun Lu Tang. Then when he's 19, he walked to Beijing and started Xingyi training under Li Kuai Yuan's teacher, the most famous one, Guo Yunshen, the divine crushing fist that we've talked about a few times in the past. And then thirdly, he learned Bagua from Cheng Tinghua, the student of Dong Aichuan, becoming so proficient that after a year, Cheng Tinghua said he was his best student. So that's a pretty big resume in terms of internal martial arts, and these are some of the top teachers of the schools.
For sure.
So the next paragraph describes his training regime when he was in Beijing, which I thought was pretty cool. So during this period, Sun learned from Guo half of each day, Xingyi, and then he went to another section of Beijing to learn from Cheng Tinghua the other half of the day.
Wow.
Guo's training was Spartan. Often he would ride on a horse, forcing Sun to hold onto its tail for distances up to 10 miles. This instruction continued for several years. Gradually, Sun became famous and was challenged many times. It was said of him that though he never lost a match, neither did he hurt anyone. So great was his skill. Which is a pretty interesting piece. I think that's also part of the legend of Sun Lu Tang, is like he's not known for being the most burly, muscular guy. He's very slight of build. And so he was able to win all these challenge matches without hurting the other person or getting hurt.
Yeah, that's like that morality thing of, want to hurt you, but I can,
If I have to.
If I have to, yeah.
Yeah, and I think in those days, challenge matches, some are fake and some are real, but it sounds like he went through that process of fighting other martial arts, doing a lot of sparring, experiencing hand-to-hand combat, basically, in the early 1905, 1910s, 1890s, that period of time.
Yeah, he kind of became like an ambassador, just sort of traveling around, I think, and getting into scraps and showing the art to different places.
Yeah, so that's what I have from Mr. Smith's book. So next we wanted to draw on a piece from one of Sun Lu Tang's books where he talks about his training with his first Xingyi teacher, Li Kuai-yuan. In it, he gives a short biography of Li here. He's from a village called Behind the Mountains. When he was young, he attended school and excelled in small script calligraphy. He was fond of boxing arts and learned damdoi, baji, and other styles. When he was in the prime of his life, he was a bodyguard for government facilities and became very well known. So it sounds like he was from that whole bodyguard generation of the late 1800s. He was always fond of competing with opponents and frequently won. Later, he encountered Guo Yun Shen in competition. Li was an expert at using his legs. He lifted up his foot to kick and noticed that Guo Yun Shen made a mere stroke with his hand. Behind Li, there was a wooden stool, and he went over it and fell to the ground more than 10 feet away. He got up and apologized for any offense, then did obeisance and became Guo's student. He attended upon Guo as if they were father and son. So it says he then trained, for years very enthusiastically and became one of the top students of Guo Yun Shen. And that's who the person we're talking about, Sun Lu Tang, learned from.
Right.
So I wanted to pull out a few of the quotes about Master Li's teachings that Sun Lu Tang would have learned. So he starts off by talking about Xingyi means the original nature of a person, which is an interesting quote.
Right.
So let me do a few of these and then we'll talk about it. So he says, the earth is like the original soil of your body. Hung, meaning earth fist, means all is one, comprehensive, inclusive, centered, containing all elements. Keep the wholeness of your body and your original nature. Xingyi contains 4 things to be transformed: Pi, Beng, Zhuan, and Pao. These 4 styles all derive from Hung. So how does that connect with our training?
Well, I think the idea is that all of the earth contains the other 4 elements, right?
Yeah, that's something that seems common in Xingyi. So the next paragraph he says, in Xingyi you move your body and limbs in a natural, unobtrusive, and harmonious way. When you achieve the highest level, you become a superior man. And I think that speaks to the Confucian idea of not of that sort of ideal person of accomplishing your self-fulfillment or self-actualization, maybe in psychology.
Yeah, and morality, and sort of there's a whole thing about just being a good person. And
so he's connecting Xingyi to that the morality side of the times where people were looking for do something to be upright and noble in a way.
Yeah, it's that trying to uplift martial arts to sort of a higher level than just beating the shit out of people, I think, too,
So the next thing is he says, Xingyi emphasizes the inner aspect so that where you think, the action goes. That reminds me of the idea of Xingyi as Xing being your intention, E being your intention, Xing being the shape that it takes.
Right, that your mind tells your body what to do and your body does it. So the E is the leader, right?
So he's saying it emphasizes the inner aspect. There's that teaching of internal martial arts,
right.
And that has so many different meanings. But I think in this case, it's saying you're letting your mind guide your attacks rather than what, your instinct, or you're just like reactive, training.
Yeah, rather than reflexes or fear,
So fear, So fear would cause you just to throw up your hands. But if your mind takes control, maybe you take a better action.
Yeah, the way Bruce talks about it in The Power of Internal Martial Arts, he talks about an animal, human, spiritual martial arts. And so the animal approach is you just kind of go berserk and
just fight with everything you got.
Give it all you got, and you don't care really what happens, as long as you win. Where the sort of human approach is a bit more reactionary, a bit more based on what you see and how you react to it. So this sort of thinking mind and that's what Xingyi is, where you see something happening, you make an action with your intent, and then your body follows that action, follows that intent. So there's no just reflexive, how fast can I move my arm and bash something kind of movements. Everything is based on your mind being in control of your body.
Yeah, that makes it. And that reminds me also of the idea of don't be scared of what hasn't hit you yet is one of the concepts we've always had. Like,
Sure.
that you're letting, your mind can get scared and freaked out, and you're reacting to stuff that actually you're just imagining hasn't happened to you yet. By staying in the moment, you react to a fist actually coming to your face rather than someone fainting or
Right.
trying to fake you out in some way.
And it goes the other way too, where when you hit somebody, that you don't celebrate and go, "Yay, I did it right," and while you're getting clobbered,
Right.
So that
You don't go too high or too low,
right,
basically.
that you stay present to what's actually happening right then and there.
So listen to this. He talks about static sitting. Is in the very next sentence. After sitting very long, the qi circulates. Action yang grows after sitting, yin. Although Xingyi action differs from that of a sedentary person, it derives action from the calmness of Taoist sedentary work. Thus, our theory is consistent with that of the Taoists. So he's saying that when you sit a long time, it circulates the qi, I guess. And he's saying we do that, but in a moving way.
Right. He's talking about, I think when he's referring to sitting, I think he's specifically referring to, like, sitting meditation.
Right, meditation.
Where you drop into your lower dandian and that whole thing. And so he's saying that Xingyi uses that same methodology of, sinking and sort of being in your body that you use in meditation.
And the way it's translated here is the calmness of the Taoist sedentary work. So that whole, being very present, calm, and not reacting to things that aren't happening, kind of present moment awareness.
Basically, I think he's saying that what you're doing while you move is the same thing that you would do if you were sitting still, or it's that you're still maintaining these original principles. It's just you're moving.
All right. So next he says, a student should not stick to one style, nor should he be too fussy about a style. Neither is the right way to learn Xingyi, which does not follow formality too closely. Which is interesting because, Xingyi is taught in a strict way, but it's also not, it's about what you can do, not about where you are on the order of the formal chart or whatever, right? Like, Xingyi has to show results.
Right. It's that piece about if it doesn't work well, right? Like, what's the point?
In Xingyi, that's not allowed.
I think getting too attached to, well, this is the way I do it, even if it doesn't work, is not the Xingyi way, right? The Xingyi way is it has to work.
So here he speaks to rules are taught by teachers, but the essence is comprehended by the boxer himself. Rather, he should seek to get to the origin of boxing. The inner helps you do the external exercise. So again, there's that internal martial arts of idea of like, what's at the very core? What's the most basic, primitive level of what's great about this, which is oftentimes like, say, qi or whatever. You're getting down to some core concept rather than a list of techniques. I don't know. It just seems to me he's speaking to that sense of get to the origin of boxing. The inner helps you do the outer.
Yeah, I think he's talking about Neigong, right? He's talking about the inner is doing, like the inner work of Neigong, so that when you do the outer movements, you still have that piece.
And finally, he must have the best teachers. Otherwise, everything will be confusing. The profundity of boxing appears beyond our reach. He says, but the golden mean says, Tao is not far from you. If you try, you can approach it. So again, he references Taoism, which is interesting because, like, there's always debates. Different schools have more or less interest in spirituality or whatever, but he's clearly, the way Sun Lu Tang's quoting him is he's putting, there's Taoist essence behind the training we do to give it a juice, to get me as marketing, but also as there's obviously truth behind it as well. But there's a reason he's calling this out,
Yeah, and there's a difference between, I think, Taoism in terms of Taoist, like, Neigong practices or sitting practices and, quote unquote, spirituality, right? I think he's talking about the Taoism of, the Neigong part of Taoism, the physical part of it, and the, sort of the cosmology of it. Because Xingyi is it is based on Taoist principles, but it's not a religious thing. You're not trying to achieve some higher level of spirituality when you practice Xingyi, but you're using some of the same things that a meditator would use to get them to the point that they could meditate long enough to do that stuff. So I think there's a lot of crossover, especially with all the standing stuff, and it's pretty
meditative.
Yeah, it's the sort of standing meditation, right? It's meditative. I think, like you say, it's because it's not really doing the Shengong part of it. It's more the container part of it, that you really can't do serious hardcore Taoist meditation if your body's too messed up, because you're just going to be in pain the whole time and struggling with getting comfortable. So Xingyi uses a lot of the same Taoist sort of Neigong principles to get so that you're comfortable in your body, basically. I mean, it really comes down to just having freedom of movement, having freedom from pain, and just being able to do things without your physical body getting in the way.
Major distraction, right? For sure.
Yeah.
And we see, it's just interesting how oftentimes these guys refer to either Buddhist or Taoist religion or Confucian principles and philosophies in the training. It's woven into the training.
Yeah, I think most of these guys probably grew up, I mean, it doesn't say that, but I'm assuming that they grew up at least partially around some of these religious ideas.
Right.
So
I mean, obviously.
Some more than others, I think, took it into their martial arts. But it's the equivalent of people do the sign of the cross when they score a touchdown.
Or you could quote, Teddy Roosevelt said, the man who fights in the arena is the one who, you draw on cultural allusions and alliterations. So the next thing we move to, it says, as you think, so you become. Boxing is the same. We begin by learning San Ti. All the forms and styles derive from it. You sink the chi to the navel and reach infinity.
That's the sort of same idea, right? You're using the Tao, or the Taoist principles of becoming one piece, of becoming unified, and
And I mean, he says reach infinity. That's not a small thing, right there.
Right. Sure. I think that's a translation thing. I think the word was probably Tao.
Could be. Could very well be. So the next thing he mentions is snake. Take the snake as an example, how it meanders and shoots forth. It is one of the 12 styles. You act like a snake. From Xingyi comes the 5 forms, and from these come the 12 styles. They all come from the inner strength, which comes from the chi generated at the navel. Crawling and curving naturally, the snake acts just like a wire. If you touch a part of it, all parts move. It is flexible and dexterous. So that's pretty cool that he jumps right into San Ti, 5 elements, 12 animals.
Right, and there's some key phrases that he drops, like the one part moves, all parts move, one part stops, all parts stops, right? I mean, he's kind of referring to these principles that are in Tai Chi as well, that you have certain guiding principles that really come from Taoist Neigong, and you're sort of, that's how you maintain the practice. So.
And especially what resonates is, it's like, how many times have we heard this one? They all come from the inner strength, which comes from the chi generated at the navel.
Right. Everything comes from the Dantian.
You could say, okay, working with the Dantian is part of the training. But, when I read these old guys, it's almost like working with the Dantian's the most important part of the training, or like the core of the training, or like the base of the training is somehow connected to this cultivating the chi of the lower Dantian. It just comes up over and over and can't get away from it.
When you're doing something that's based on using that part of your body and doing things with that area, I mean, it doesn't matter what you call it. If you want to call it chi, you want to call it your core. I mean, it's just being able to access the qua, right, is what we call it, which is that area sort of from your upper thigh to just above your hip, maybe even a little higher up towards your midriff. And that when you have awareness of that area, there is a center point in there that is your Dandian, lower Dandian, and it doesn't have any real, it's not a thing you can touch, but it is your physical center, right? Like if you took a cross, right, like cut yourself, bisected yourself, there would be that spot. So on one level, it's a physical thing of, you're not throwing your head around or whipping your body around, that you're maintaining this sort of physical alignment. But on a deeper level, it keeps you just from reacting to things that aren't actually there. It keeps you sort of
There's a grounded feeling by having a little lower in your body.
Yeah,
like, I feel like you're seated in your legs a little more somehow.
You're seeing from inside your body, not from your sort of like reactive mind. So it gives you this sense of just sort of being able to withdraw inside and see what's coming at you without freaking out.
There's a poise to it, a sense of posture of like calmness.
It's
he keeps mentioning that calmness part, and I think that's part of it too.
It's cliche, but it's your center. When you find your center, you don't freak out that something is coming at you because you're not unbalanced.
The next part is, when you concentrate, you can make yourself anything. The mind is everything. When learning boxing, never feel proud. In my youth, when I boxed or fought with the spear, I was often defeated, but I learned and improved. So it's something about the concentration. You can make yourself anything. The mind is everything. Like, this is a guy who's an expert spear fighter from a bodyguard company talking about the mind is everything. Like, that, you know, he's not like sort of me, like someone who's just an average Joe, like practices in the park. Like, this guy was taking it out in the field and using it, and he comes back with the message that the mind is everything, not the body.
Well, what controls your body is your mind. I mean, this is the primary sort of directive of Xingyi, that it's mind first, body second, right? That your mind tells your body what to do. You're not just having your body react to things out of reflex and then trying to figure out what's happening with your mind. And that training is the Santi training. It is the 5 elements. It is all of it. But the end result of it basically is you can stand there, and when something comes at you, you can just sit there and you're in your belly, and you don't actually have to move until the thing is a real threat. You're not just freaking out and kind of, you know, imagining things happening to yourself or whatever. And
so he ends with a few paragraphs on advice for training. So he says, let your mind be empty and your chi full in every posture. So step 1, empty your mind and fill chi in every posture. Like, that itself is a pretty rigorous process, but it's only one sentence. Hold your waist correctly. In the 5 forms and the 12 styles, cleanse confused chi. Imagine that it is perching beneath your navel and regulate your breathing. Hold your tongue against your teeth and your mouth half open and breathe naturally. I think these are common instructions to
more or less. I mean, he's describing them a little bit differently than is the more common sort of, but you know, he's getting at the same.
So those are the things you're supposed to do. Then he says, never do 3 things. 1, push out your chest. 2, raise up your abdomen. Or 3, blow up your chi.
Yep. I would agree with that.
So that pushing out your chest is always a no-no in all the schools. Like, you learn from the start to lift from the top of your head, not from like forward with your chest. And then don't raise your abdomen. So I wonder, does that mean like clench your stomach muscles?
Pulling up your stomach muscles.
Like yoga style?
More like clenching your stomach muscles.
Because I think we do rise up from the top to like let your belly relax into the space rather than like squeeze the guts, kind of.
What you want to do is lift your spine. What frequently people do to try to do that is clench their stomach muscles. But your stomach muscles never clench in this. It's the muscles and ligaments along your spine stretching upward, but you're never clenching anything.
So he ends with some practice advice here. Sometimes when following the technique exactly, you feel that your body's not coordinated, your abdomen does not feel good, the postures are bad, you're not feeling happy. Don't worry. You have gained something and are at a point where you can solve the problems. Do not despair. Instead, ask guidance of your teacher. You then comprehend, everything will crystallize in your mind, and out of great confusion will come bliss, certainty, and progress. Which is a nice, encouraging end. So he's saying, you know, when you're having a bad practice session is when you're on the verge of making a breakthrough. I think we've heard that before in some of these books.
Yeah, and that's a really kind of big thing is that frequently with Xingyi, because you're doing motions that you haven't done before, your mind and your neurology is shifting a little bit. So it feels really awkward at first. And part of the training is learning how to do it where it doesn't feel awkward. So basically, practice, practice, practice. You just have to keep doing it until the point where it doesn't feel weird to stand on one leg anymore, or it doesn't feel weird to keep your back straight. It feels natural. It feels normal. The phrase I like from Ken Fish is, you make the unnatural natural, right? That you make things that feel completely weird and uncomfortable, you make them feel comfortable. And how do you do that? You practice. Keep at it, and if you get stuck, you ask your teacher. That's why it's really important to have a teacher. I mean, even if it's someone that you only see once a year, if you know the right questions to ask, you can, get a lot out of it.
Drawing from a study of Taiji Chuan by Sun Lu Tang, translated by Tim Cartmel, we're looking at the section where Sun Lu Tang is learning Xingyi Chuan. For the first year, Sun studied Xingyi Chuan with Neijiaquan. He was only taught the San Ti standing posture for a full year. He was not allowed to practice anything else. Sun wondered why he was taught only standing. However, since his teacher had told him to only practice standing, he did not complain. After about 6 months, Sun started to feel as though his chest and stomach were full and his feet had roots. He was starting to develop internal power from his standing practice, and he figured that this is what real Kung Fu was all about. So 1 year in San Ti, I mean...
That's exactly what I did.
Did you?
Yeah, it was... Well, it was 9 months of classes, but,
right.
It was basically...
So you wouldn't go anywhere past San Ti in the first class?
No, we didn't... we not just San Ti. We did P-Trin for a year. So, San Ti was 6 months of it, and then P-Trin was 6 months.
You got to do P-Trin to go from San Ti to San Ti.
Basically, yeah, but it was... We didn't do much beyond that.
Awesome. So, and I would say... Do you have to just do it 6 hours a day for a full year? No, but it's a good thing to concentrate on somewhere in your Xingyi journey. It may not be the first year, but at some point you're going to have to do it for a year.
Yeah, that could be 5 minutes a day for a year.
Because the Xingyi school I started with, we did Babu Da, Ba Ti, Ba Lian So. We didn't do San Ti. San Ti was considered more an advanced practice.
Yeah, I think different schools have different, orders that they make, importance of, learning the form versus doing that stuff. Some schools don't have that piece of it, so they focus more on the forms.
Sure. After these experiences, he started to stand more diligently. After Sun had practiced standing for approximately 1 year, his teacher saw him practicing one day and snuck up on him to test his level. Li hit Sun in his back with a palm strike, and Sun's standing posture was not affected by the blow. He realized that Sun had attained a good level of development and had potential, so he invited Sun to come live with him and started to teach him Xingyi's 5 elements and 12 animals.
All right.
Sun practiced his Xingyi Chuan so hard that after only 2 years of training, he had developed a much higher level of Xingyi Chuan skill than was expected of someone of his age and experience.
This seems to be a common thing with him. All his teachers, seem to think, "Wow, this guy's really good."
This guy's the best. It seems like his hard work was a big part of it. So then the book talks more about his experience, the different people he met along the way, in his life and so on. But after a couple of years, Li Kuai-yuan told Sun that he had taught him just about everything that he knew. He suggested that if Sun wanted to learn more about Xingyi Chuan, he would introduce him to his teacher, Guo Yunshen. Sun was very excited about the possibility of studying with Guo.
Hey folks, Isaac here again. Just want to thank everyone for listening again. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Check out our Patreon. We have a year-end listener question episode where we answer questions that have come in from our Patreon listeners. We also have some interviews up there, and we will have a couple more coming out soon. Check out the Instagram for images to go along with the episodes. Like and subscribe. Leave us a review on iTunes. And most importantly, take care of yourself.